who, despite not having any formal music education himself, became such an amazing educator that later on an entire conservatory was named after him. Well, today I want to tell you about a Russian composer by the name of Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov. Nikolai was born in a small town in Russia in 1844 into an aristocratic and culturally engaged family. There was music in the family, but it would have never been, it never was seen as like the path to go. His father was a government official and his brother was a naval officer. At a young age, he fell in love with music and he started taking piano lessons and did it very well. He also had a vivid imagination, loved storytelling, and so this is all going to come to play, but much later in his life, because at this time, he was expected to pursue a military career and he actually didn't have much issue with that, so that's what he did. At age 12, he enters the Imperial Russian Naval College in St. Petersburg, and this is important for his life for two reasons. One, he's getting this really rigorous naval training that sets him up in a good way. But two, it's in St. Petersburg, and there is a lot of music around in St. Petersburg, and suddenly he is surrounded by sounds that he hadn't heard in that small town that he was living in. And he really got into music and he was taking piano lessons, and he really started showing an interest in composition. He also meets someone, an established composer by the name of Balakirev, and he really kind of takes him under his wing in a way. Through Balakirev, he becomes a part of this group known as the Mighty Handful. And these are composers that are all living around St. Petersburg, and they get to know each other. And it's kind of, think of it like a writer's group, you know, where you bring your work and other people critique it. It's kind of like that, but they also have a very distinct mission. They want their music to sound Russian, not this German romantic music that is lovely, but it's kind of taken over. But they really want Russian music to sound Russian and tell the Russian story. So that was their main goal. So he is still a naval officer at this point, but he starts composing. Now, other than this group of friends, he has no other musical education, and you couldn't even really call it an education with them. He is exploring it on his own. He's figuring it out on his own, and they'll say, this is great, this might need a little bit more work. But that was it. It was all something that he just had internally. From 1862 to 1865, he embarks on a 3-year naval voyage around the world, and this has such a big influence. One, he is suddenly exposed to other cultures, exotic cultures, but also to their sounds and other ways of music, besides the German and the Russian that he was aware of. But also on the flip side of that, because it's so long and you're at sea so long, he also has long periods of like isolation. And this leads to reflection and a lot of internal looking. So he's both looking out more than he ever has, and he's also looking inward more than he ever has. During this time on the boat, he starts working on his first symphony. That is quite a feat and quite like a huge thing to try to overcome. You're nowhere near your friends that can maybe help you. You're self-taught and you're going to do it anyway. Well, when he came back in 1865, it was performed to quite some success. It was celebrated actually as one of Russia's first true Russian symphonies. He was back and he wanted to leave the naval life. He wasn't bitter about it, but he wanted music to be his life. Now, he had a problem that he recognized himself. He had no formal training at all. He did, however, have some really good connections. So he continued to kind of stumble on for a little bit, but then there's a twist, right? People are recognizing his music and they're seeing that not only does it sound pretty, but it's technically really sound and great. So in 1871, he's offered a position as a teacher at the conservatory in St. Petersburg. And he thinks to himself, this is too good to let go and say no, but also I'm highly unqualified. If I have a second or third year student, they're already going to have more education than me. But he decided to take it and trust the people that gave it to him. But he also decided, I'm going to study. I'm really going to study. Not maybe in a classroom, but on his own, and he can go to his colleagues. And that is what he did. He started studying all of theory. He studied counterpoint. He studied orchestration. He studied harmony. And as he got better, he looked back at his earlier works and he's like, this is not anything I would do now. There's some issues. And he reworked his earlier works. He had such a humility, but he also did understand that his stuff was good. So I think there was a good balance. But I also think that made him a phenomenal teacher, because you can have all the knowledge in the world and really understand something, but not be a good teacher. To be a good teacher, you have to, one, be able to tell the story well, but more importantly, you have to remember what it's like to not know. You have to, you can't just make assumptions. And boy, he had that. So I think not having the education probably helped elevate him as a teacher. In the early 1870s, he meets a woman by the name of Nadezhda, and she is a pianist and she's also a composer, and they fall in love, and in 1872 they got married. Now, they had a great marriage, but not only was it a good partnership in life, it was also a good partnership in their career. She helped him. She would go over his work and edit if needed. She was very intellectually supportive, musically supportive. He'd write something, she'd play it for him. And so they went through life this way. Together, they had 7 children. But not only was that enough to keep their house lively, they had an open home. All these musicians and people would just come in. It was kind of like a center of Russian culture, but like in a home way. From the 1870s to the 1890s, he is really working. Yes, he's still teaching, and he never stops trying to educate himself, but he is composing phenomenal, amazing pieces of work. He is known for this vivid musical storytelling and this brilliant orchestration, but also the use of Russian folklore, of course. During this time, he writes the famed Scheherazade. He also writes Flight of the Bumblebee. He writes Capriccio Espagnol. He writes the Russian Easter Festival Overture. And his music almost sounds cinematic, like a score, like you can see things happening in front of you. He continued to stay close with this tight-knit group that he started off with. And one of the guys was Borodin, and Mussorgsky was in there, and so this really helped. What happened was that Borodin and Mussorgsky passed away. He took their unfinished music, and he helped finish it. It wasn't a selfish act, like I want to have my name on their stuff. He did it to preserve their legacy and allowed their name, of course, to stay on their works. By this point, at St. Petersburg Conservatory, he became known as one of the most amazing educators. Everybody wanted to be in his classes. He taught many people composition, including Igor Stravinsky. And Stravinsky, in particular, he absorbed a lot of this dazzling orchestration techniques, the techniques that would shape the 20th century. Yeah, Stravinsky did a lot on his own, but somebody taught him, and there we get it. Rimsky Korsakov, trying to find this Russian music, he was influenced a lot by the myths, by magic, Eastern tales, folk legends. He would read them and study them and put them to music. He was also influenced by the sea, of course. You can hear rolling waves in his music, shimmering orchestration, definitely expansive landscapes through his music. Through it all, he was deeply committed to finding a national identity in classical music for the Russians. In 1905, there was a student protest, and he actually went out and supported his students. This was frowned upon, and he was let go of his position at the conservatory. It didn't last long. He was good. They needed him. They took him back. It does show, though, I think, how committed he was to his students, to stand with them. Later on in life, he started writing his own biography. He started revisioning many of his works, but he had some heart problems. And at the age of 64, in 1908, he passed away. Several decades after his death, actually during the Second World War in 1944, the St. Peter's Conservatory is renamed the Rimsky Korsakov State University after their beloved and influential educator. He did not begin as this traditional prodigy. He did not start out as a musician, but it was something that just was there and it had to come out. Technique can be learned and discipline can transform your talent, but imagination, this ability to turn a story, to turn a vision into this amazing piece of music, that is a true artist. And that's what he was, a true artist. Go and listen to something by Nikolai Rimsky Korsakov.